every child in the world would celebrate if their parents quit trying to fix them. I don't care how old the child is. What do parents do? We offer advice without waiting to be asked. Mm-hmm. That's called fixing. That's the symptom of an emotional remote control. Now, you want to know what life looks like when you have set down, when you've gained the awareness, because awareness is first, attitude is second, where it's like, not mine. Mine or not mine, me or not me. When you start getting this attitude, these boundaries, then you are no longer carrying unconscious emotional remote controls. And you started pulling yours back from other people, just dismantling them. You don't tell anybody. They figure it out when you stop reacting to them. And then when someone says, you make me so mad. Really? Do you really want to give me that much control over your emotions? I will have fun with you. All right.
You're good to go. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lane and Laney. All the things with Lane and Laney.
You were doing so good there for a couple of weeks.
I know. I screw that intro up just about every time. Today we have a very special guest. I'm kind of excited to hear what she has to say. We found another motivational speaker that's going to give us some insight on some things. Our next guest is a motivational speaker with a side mission of eliminating teen suicide. Her views in the Total Success Mindset Training System teach people to come out from their own shadow, from behind their own shadow, and beat away self-sabotage. Our time with her is limited today, so I will leave her introduction shorter than usual so we can get right to her message. Please welcome Miss Jackie Simmons.
Hi, Jackie.
Well, thank you. And shortening my bio is not always easy. You did a great job.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for being with us today. We've got many questions for you. I'm extremely curious about the motivational speaker stuff, and not to push aside the teen suicide thing, of course, but we'll get to it.
Well, I'm going to just tell you, they're not inseparable in my world, because I'm not an interventionist. Okay. On the teen suicide and the mission to stop teen suicide and make teen suicide a thing of the past, we're not waiting for signs.
No,
we're upstream from that. We believe in having the talk about suicide before you think it's needed.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So anything that improves life or inspires people is suicide prevention in our book.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Okay. Well, like I said, we'll get to a couple of those questions later on, but right now I want to touch on the motivational stuff. Can you tell us first about your motivational speaking, and more importantly, is this the idea that you threw yourself into to turn your hustle into a profit?
Oh, wow. Okay. So this the idea. If you mean teen suicide prevention and that, the answer is
no.
No, yeah. No.
I know they're totally separate.
And motivational speaking, the answer is yes and no. Okay. I wanted to be a platform speaker. My grandfather was a preacher. My mama was a teacher. My daddy was a drill sergeant. I grew up, and I have 3 older sisters. Okay. So I grew up with somebody telling me what to think, what to do, and what to believe from the moment I was born.
Okay.
And in the 80s, I saw a platform speaker, what we now call a motivational speaker. And it was the first woman I had seen take the stage, because military, other than teaching in the front of the room, stages were reserved for men back in prior to, at least for the most part. So I saw a lady take the stage, and she owned the stage.
Yeah.
She strode onto the stage in the Baltimore. I lived outside of Baltimore. Okay. She strode onto the stage in her heels and her hose and her red suit. This was back in the day when that was the normal outfit. But there was something else about her. She had one of those wedge haircuts, which was kind of new. Short hair for women was kind of a new thing. And it was beautiful gold here. And across the middle was this sable color, this red-brown. Okay. And back here, it was eggplant.
Oh, wow.
It was purple.
We
In
didn't
the
see that back
80s,
then.
this was not the norm.
No.
And the first thing she did taught me one of the lessons I teach now, which is name the elephant in the room. If there's an elephant in the room, introduce it. So she talked about her hair.
Okay.
And she used it to explain her attitude about life. Because after she got off the stage one time, there was a line of people waiting to talk to her. And a man came up to her and said, "May I say something?" "Of course." "Your hair is ridiculous."
Oh, jeez.
And she said, "Thank you," because her mama had taught her to be polite. And as he turned to walk away, she said, "Excuse me, is there something about the color of my hair that impacts the quality of your life?" Because her mama had also taught her to be direct. And that attitude of owning the stage and
Yeah.
naming the elephant in the room, even though she didn't call it that, that's what I call it, stayed with me. And that's been, 40 years now. Motivational speaking. For me, motivational is one-on-one networking. And every time you open your mouth, you're speaking. Most people don't know that. They think speaking is what you do on a stage.
Right.
Conversation is what you do one-on-one. They're the same.
Okay.
So my motivational speaking was all networking. I teach a workshop called Confessions of a Networking Junkie.
Okay.
That was the first workshop I ever created for a chamber of commerce.
Oh,
And it's all the same. People make it, this is bigger, this is smaller. No, all speaking is the same. Now you've dialed down the drama, you can get on to actually listening, which is more important than speaking.
yeah, that's true.
So is that how you still portray your message today? You view the audience. I don't know how big of a crowd you draw or what's the general size of your room that you're speaking to, but is that kind of the way that you go about? I mean, do you have topics that you start with and then just act like you're addressing just a certain individual and you're just speaking to the whole
Okay,
room?
so your stage presence and how do you handle a stage? And the answer is the size of the room. So the largest in-person room I think I have spoken to was around 500. Virtually, who knows
Right.
anymore? Who knows? And especially now that everything's recorded, your message now echoes in a way that it didn't echo a decade ago. So your message now echoes. So pretend for just 1 minute that you can't see the audience, because that's the world we're living in right now.
Yeah, it's very true.
And so the person that you have to inspire, oh, by the way, this actually was true even when you could see the audience. The only person that your job is to inspire as a motivational speaker is you. When you're on the stage, your job is to inspire you. And if you are inspired, other people might choose to be inspired by you. The minute you try to inspire somebody else, you're screwed. Especially as a speaker, because you can't control other people's emotions.
Okay.
And the person whose emotions you want to be in control of is the speaker.
Okay.
The goal is to influence an audience, but not to control them. So not to inspire the audience, just instead of inspire them, just inspire you.
Okay. So that makes sense. I mean, do you go out there with a certain set of topics? I mean, you say you're looking to inspire yourself. Do you go out there and say, this is the way I'm feeling today. These are the things that happened to me last week, and I want to talk about those.
No,
Okay.
I don't usually. And so the world, according to Jackie, I'm a one-trick pony. No matter how many different aspects or how many different questions someone's going to throw at me, I'm going to bring it back to the inside game is the one that you're playing to win. And the outside game is the one that social media and most gurus are telling you to play, which is why we're so frustrated and burned out.
Yeah.
I think we're playing the wrong game. The game that you must win is not what other people see. It's the one that's going on behind your eyes and between your ears. It's always been this, no matter who you read, whether you're reading Dale Carnegie or you're reading the Bible, it doesn't matter. Every single thing that is classic literature says the same thing. What you think about is what you bring about.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as you get that, other people's judgments, opinions, and expectations start to stay other people's judgments, opinions, and expectations, and you're back in the center of your own life. It sounds really simple. For me, it was a 40-year journey.
And say it sounds simple, but it's so hard. I mean, we both struggle with that daily. I know a lot of people that do. You're so worried about how other people will perceive you that you kind of shrink yourself a little bit.
They talk to stop bullying. The talk to build boundaries and stop bullying is based on this concept, this idea that in any given moment, you're either the club owner and you're in your own ballpark where you make the rules, or you're a ball player and you're in someone else's ballpark with their rules. And this really simple concepts. If you're a ball player, you've only got 3 options. You're going to accept their rules without conflict so you can play ball, make money, have fun. Mm-hmm. Or you're going to argue with their rules and create conflict. You'll still play ball, but you won't make as much money and you will not have as much fun. Or your third option, if they are a good club owner, they're going to tell you to get out of their ballpark.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine a ball team with any other rules for their players?
No, it's pretty simple.
Here's what happens in business. Club owners have 3 responsibilities: put their rules in writing, communicate them clearly, and apply them equitably. Club owners, business owners suck at all 3 of those.
Yeah.
I have a human resources consulting background.
Okay.
So what I noticed was that many small businesses, especially solopreneurs and businesses under $1 million in revenue, the owners don't know the rules that they want for their own club. They're trying to get their team to play without knowing when to show up for practice, without knowing how many, any of the rules.
Yeah.
They also, what rules they do know, they forget to communicate clearly. There are a lot of companies operating without the basics of job descriptions or company culture, a clear vision or mission statement. When these things are missing, it creates chaos and confusion inside a company. But the company owner doesn't realize they're the cause because they're not doing what their job is. Their job is not to be a ball player, even though most of them have those skills. Their job is to write the rules of the game, communicate them clearly, and apply them equitably. Here's what happens when they don't apply them equitably. And as far as I'm concerned, this was a huge problem pre-COVID. Now it's a little different, but pre-COVID, the biggest issue facing corporate America was that club owners weren't aware that their ball players, many of them had taken option 3 and left the ballpark. They had just forgotten to take their bodies with them and they were still collecting paychecks.
Yeah.
We call it a disengaged workforce.
I was one of those ball players.
So she was on that and she just left that job. So
Yeah.
she had left long before, just like you said.
Yeah.
Mentally and emotionally, we get out of the ballpark way before we do it physically.
Mm-hmm.
It starts with emotion, emotionally we're gone, mentally we're gone, and then eventually physically we're gone. The club owners, one of their main jobs is to notice and to address it immediately, actually to prevent it. The club owner's job is to prevent it by explaining the 3 options. But you can't explain the options to a ball player if you don't know your rules.
Right.
Yeah.
So it all comes back to know your rules, put them in writing, communicate them clearly, and apply them equitably. And this works in the home too. I mean, equitably, not equally, because you wouldn't have the same expectations of a 12-year-old that you do of a 2-year-old.
Right.
I hope.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in business, sometimes it gets a little muddled. And so that's the basis of this idea that you asked me about. It's like, yeah, this is not rocket science. It's just not usually explained in a way people can digest it. My students and clients tell me that when they started applying the ballpark theory to their lives and their businesses, their lives and their businesses changed. They had fewer absentee days. They had more productivity. People started becoming a team when they all knew the rules and they knew the positions they played. So the ballpark analogy works really well. But first, you got to be willing to put your rules in writing and communicate them clearly.
Yes.
And let your ball players take option 3 when they need to take option 3. Most club owners try to get them to stay. Not a good plan. You can demoralize an entire department, if not bring down a whole company.
Oh, yeah.
By incentivizing a disengaged ball player to stay.
It's just so funny listening to you explain it, because I can see the angel on my shoulder and the devil on my shoulder. On the angel on my shoulder, I'm thinking of a guy that I used to work out with that runs a company, and he is just a brilliant guy, a loving man, and you can see that throughout his company. All of his company employees are happy. And then the devil on my shoulder comes from the company that she just left, where the guy was a complete asshole, and it just trickled down from the top, and everybody was that way. And then, like I said, she checked out long ago, thought about the exit plan, figured out another position to get into, and had to leave because it was such a destructive environment.
I'm going to argue that she didn't have to leave. Sorry. No. Many people stay, and you know it. You worked with them.
Oh, yeah.
The people who lead, as Thoreau said, most men lead lives of quiet desperation. They stay.
Yeah.
And it's because we weren't taught how to handle bullies. And in my mind, being bullied includes being pressured to perform in areas you are not gifted in. That's a form of bullying in my world.
Okay.
And we live in a world that says, oh no, you're supposed to be uncomfortable and stick it out and tough it out, and that list goes on.
Yeah.
And the reality is, there are times where being stoic is necessary. You know, you don't quit on your kids, you don't quit on your parents or your siblings. You know, there are times where you don't quit. But there are also times where getting out of the ballpark is the only thing that makes sense. And if you don't, you're not a victim, you're a volunteer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. I was a volunteer for a long time.
So she stayed in it for a long time. Just, this sucks. This is terrible. I can't believe I'm doing this. But, you know, you're tied down with obligations and things like that.
But it's good insurance. It's good money. What, you know, I can't.
Yeah. You can argue yourself into playing a small game with your life. And it's all a scarcity mentality.
Yeah.
It's good insurance. What's really behind that statement? I'm afraid I'll get sick and go bankrupt and my family will suffer if I don't stay where there's good insurance.
Yeah.
What's really happening behind these statements that keep us in places that are not comfortable is a fear that we just haven't addressed and identified. When you live your life from a place of absolute certainty that the universe has your back, you get out of the unacceptable ballpark sooner. But it's easier if you first accept that that's just who they are. That's how they run their club. Those are their rules. It works for them. And you stop judging them. You accept their rules without conflict before you leave. And I'll argue that you stayed long enough to just accept that it wasn't going to change.
Yeah. Very true.
Once you can accept that it's not going to change without conflict, then when you leave, you don't carry the conflict with you. But people who leave when they're in option 2 and they're arguing with the rules and creating conflict, they actually carry the energy of conflict with them to the next ballpark, and they don't understand that they become the problem because they're bringing the energy of conflict with them. They never accepted. And so they blamed. It was that person's fault that I left. as opposed to that did not suit me and owning it.
Yeah.
And when it's the other person's fault, when you're in that blame place, guess what? Your energy you're bringing to the next place.
Yeah. It's just a cycle.
Yeah, it becomes a cycle. And I'm sure you've heard it happen. You've had it happen. You're talking to a friend and they're telling you about the issues they're having with their current boyfriend or girlfriend or boss or coworker. And all of a sudden you realize this is the same problem they had with their last boyfriend, girlfriend, boss, or coworker.
Yep.
And the one before that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's because each time they've left a relationship, they've left from option 2. They've left while they were in conflict. So they're bringing that energy with them, and it's a repeating pattern. If there was a bumper sticker philosophy, mine would be life lessons are repeated until learned.
Mm.
And when it comes to dealing with relationships and other people, the lesson is when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
why
when
do
you
we struggle
master
with
that, life becomes easy.
Yeah.
I'll say what like you said, I don't know why we all struggle with that.
Oh, because we were taught to give people second chances and
try to
third
fix
chances.
them, try to fix them,
And if I love them enough, they'll change.
Yeah.
The famous line of all misery, I love you enough for both of us.
oh,
When someone says, but I don't love you that way. Oh, but I love you enough for both of us. The
somebody
answer is, oh, no, you don't.
Yeah.
That's also scarcity. I'm so afraid that I will never have love in my life that I will accept crumbs from you rather than wait for love. Rather than love myself enough that I don't need love from outside of me. This is the cry of humanity in our culture right now. We've been taught, talk about looking for love in all the wrong places.
yeah.
We've been taught to look for love outside of ourselves.
Yeah.
We've been taught to look for happiness outside of ourselves. Everything from the marketing messages to the country music. You make me feel like a natural woman.
Right.
Bullshit. You were feeling hot and you gave him credit so that you could get what you wanted.
Yeah.
I mean, we give away that power, but the reality is you feel how you feel. And except we don't. You've probably seen this or heard this. You're in the grocery store. You're just shopping. You ever been in a grocery store? I have to ask this now because some people have never been in a grocery store. It blows
Oh
my mind.
gosh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're shopping, and an aisle or two over, you hear it start. It's this verbal scuffle between an adult and a child. And then it happens. You hear the adult. You make me so mad. In that instant, the adult just handed the child an emotional remote control. The child, not knowing any better, accepts it. And along with it comes a boatload of guilt. Because in that moment, the child just accepted responsibility for the emotional state and stability of the adult. They don't know any better. They give their emotional remote controls away. They accept emotional remote controls from other people. And by the time I was in my 20s, I could walk into a room and tell you the emotional state of everyone in that room except for one person.
Yourself.
Me. Living alone for the first time in my life was when my kids were about grown. Actually, they were grown. I was divorced from my second husband. Home to myself. I just renovated this upstairs bathroom. It was a loft that overlooked the living room. And so beautiful little California style house is what they called it. Lots of patios and glass, even in Maryland, no basement, you know, and you went in and there were stairs and loft that looked over and it's a bedroom and it had a bath. That I'm up there in this big, you know, deep tub that I had put in. And all of a sudden I felt it start to shake. And I'm like, oh shit, Maryland does not get a lot of earthquakes, but they are not unheard of. They do happen. And I'm like, oh crap. And then I'm like, uh-oh, it's not an earthquake. It's the renovation. And the tub is falling into the kitchen.
Oh,
no
God.
way.
So I slid out of the tub, grabbed a towel, crawled across the floor, slithered down the stairs. I mean, I'm crawling down this open staircase, and I get to the bottom step and I sit down. And I realized it wasn't the tub falling and it wasn't the house shaking. I was having a panic attack.
Oh,
For the first time in my life, there was no one around to push the buttons on my emotional remote control. And emotionally, I was spinning out of control
Interesting.
because I had never learned to have that control inside. And I spent the next 20 years of my life learning how to help people first experience emotional control for themselves, and second, dismantle the emotional remote controls that they had given away and to give back the ones they had accepted. Other people around you, when you start giving back emotional remote controls, they get really weird because all of a sudden they're not getting the response that they expect to get when they say, you make me feel so mad. You make me love you. You know, whatever it is, when you're not responsible for their emotional state, they don't know what to do.
No,
so how do you give that back?
you just turn and
Well,
say,
it's as simple sometimes as setting it down. Just acknowledging, oh, I am feeling responsible for your emotions. How do you feel? What do you start asking different questions instead of trying to fix them? By the way, the urge to fix is based in emotional remote controls. It's based in, I don't want to feel uncomfortable because you're uncomfortable. And if you're uncomfortable, I'm to blame. And that's what an emotional remote control feels like. I'm to blame if you're unhappy. Now, it's great if they're happy. Woo, I made you happy. Yes. Yeah. But you can't have a one-sided quarter. You know, you can't have a quarter that just has a head. It's also got a tail. So if you're responsible for I made you happy, guess what happens when they're sad? Uh-oh. It's still your fault. So setting down the emotional remote control gives you the ability to celebrate with someone when they're happy, being happy with them, being happy for them. And this is a great gift when you can just celebrate people's wins. And it gives you the ability to be there for them without trying to fix them when they're not happy. Every child in the world would celebrate if their parents quit trying to fix them. I don't care how old the child is. What do parents do? We offer advice without waiting to be asked. That's called fixing. That's the symptom of an emotional remote control. Now, you want to know what life looks like when you have set down, when you've gained the awareness, because awareness is first, attitude is second, where it's like, not mine, mine or not mine, me or not me. When you start getting this attitude, these boundaries, then you are no longer carrying unconscious emotional remote controls. And you started pulling yours back from other people, just dismantling them. You don't tell anybody. They figure it out when you stop reacting to them. And then when someone says, you make me so mad. Really? Do you really want to give me that much control over your emotions? I will have fun with you.
All right.
You know, it's amazing how fast people will backpedal once they become aware that they are giving away their emotional control to someone else. But we're taught to do that because being responsible for ourselves without the manual to have emotional control just feels wrong. It's just hard.
Yeah.
So why is that? Is that being selfish? Do people think they're being selfish if they?
Oh, has anybody ever accused you of being selfish?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. What's the difference between being selfish and being self-centered? Selfish is when what you're doing is not what they want. It's manipulation. They're trying to get you to change. When somebody calls you selfish, they are exerting, they're pushing the button on your emotional remote control. That's what that is.
Okay.
That's literally, if somebody calls you selfish and it bothers you, you have given that person an emotional remote control and they are pushing your buttons. You might want to consider dismantling that. Self-centered. I realized one day that if I did not change how I was living, I was going to get to the end of my life never having lived my life. I was living my life by other people's judgments, opinions, and expectations. Now we call this riding an elephant named Joe. Judgments, opinions, and expectations. Getting down off of that elephant is how the emotional remote controls really come into play. This understanding that if I own my emotions, ooh, I am feeling because I'm thinking. It's not because of anything you're doing. Mm-hmm. If I told you that you had green hair, how upset would you be?
Not very.
I wouldn't care.
Why not?
Yeah.
Because it's not true.
It's not true.
But if I told you that you were mean, how upset would you be?
I'd be confused. Why do you feel that?
Because there might be this element of truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. That, oh, am I mean? You start to question. Mm-hmm. And that's how this works. When you're self-centered, then you don't stay confused very long because you just go,
okay,
I'm not mean. You know, you look for, you can listen to people's comments and take it as feedback, and you can put it through the filter of, is that true? But when you're giving them an emotional remote control, as soon as they push that button, you lose the ability to have a filter and to ask the question, is that true? Because you get hijacked by that little part of your brain called the amygdala, and it produces chemicals like adrenaline and cortisol. And what happens is the blood flow to the part of your brain that can actually ask questions diminishes immediately.
Oh.
Yeah, this is the story of stress. We all have one ancestor, by the way. His name is Og, and he's caveman. He's our common ancestor. Mm-hmm. And his body was elegantly designed for the environment he lived in. You know, Og would get up in the morning, get some breakfast, stretch, go out of his cave, and see a shaking bush. He did not have to think. In that instant, he's back in the cave. All he saw was a shaking bush. He's back in the cave. If you could freeze frame on Og, what would happen is that his amygdala would flood his system with cortisol, epinephrine, adrenaline, and blood would flow to his main muscles. He's ready for fight or flight. This is called the stress response. And he was in action without thinking. And when he's back in the cave, what does he do? I think I'll wait before I go outside. When you take 3 deep breaths, so deep that your belly moves, this is diaphragmatic breathing. This is why yoga and meditation are based on breathing. You're triggering sensors at the base of your lungs that tell your body to put out the chemicals that counterbalance the stress chemicals. So Og's body went back to homeostasis. It went back to calm and normal in seconds. Worked really, really well for him. It's the natural negative bias of the brain that allowed him to do that. Why? He walked out and saw a shaking bush. What did he know about a shaking bush? Last week, his friend Larry got close to a shaking bush and got eaten. Yeah, he had to be negatively focused. That's how he survived. You know, purple plant. What do I know about a purple plant? Last time I ate a purple plant, I got sick. Not eating purple plant. His brain operated on negative feedback. Machinery operates on negative feedback. A machine on positive feedback would oscillate out of control. So this is how your brain is designed. And this is how stress works. And it still works that way today. Because you fast forward to today, our brains have developed. We've got this thing called a prefrontal cortex with memory, more accessible memory, fancier memory. And nothing else has changed. We don't have a lot of real dinosaurs. But what we do have is perceived dinosaurs. And your brain cannot tell the difference between a real threat, a perceived or imagined threat or the memory of a threat, which is what PTSD is. Your brain can't tell the difference. I didn't have any real dinosaurs in my office, but I had a boss who liked to come in and stand over my shoulder. And he'd ask me a question. And I would mutter something like, I'll get back to you. And he'd walk away. Now, what was happening while he was standing here? Was I doing some deep breathing? No, I was not breathing at all most of the time. So what was happening? My body was flooded with epinephrine and adrenaline and cortisol. And the blood, the other thing that happened in Og's body, the blood that flows to his arms and legs, it comes from his head, that higher functioning areas of the brain, because that's what prevented Og from bleeding to death if he got a head injury, which was kind of common with saber-toothed tigers. My boss would leave and I would, that's what he wanted. And off I'd have to run, chasing him down the hallway, because then I could remember. And this is our brain on stress. What's so bad about this in our day and age is three things. The first is that unlike Og, we often don't get a chance for our bodies to go back to homeostasis. We don't take enough deep breaths in the day. So the natural degradation of the stress chemicals, that cocktail that we're flooded with, is 24 hours. When was the last time you went 24 hours without being triggered? We get triggered and we starts to degrade, and then we get triggered and it starts to degrade, and then we get triggered. And by the end of the day, we wonder why we can't sleep at night. It's because we've got all these stress chemicals in our bodies. But here's the real challenge. Og's body, so elegantly designed, when he would get triggered, fight or flight, two systems shut down in his body. I mean, think about this. When you're wrestling, getting ready to wrestle a saber-toothed tiger, what percentage of your resources do you want available to you?
All of them.
Yeah, all of them. So Og's body stopped trying to digest his breakfast. Why? Because his body didn't want to divert resources to digesting his breakfast when he's trying to avoid becoming breakfast for somebody else. And the other system that shut down besides digestion was healing. He didn't need to devote resources to healing the scratch he got on his leg yesterday when he's trying to avoid becoming lacerated today. Now think about this in terms of your own body. You want to know why we have a rise in obesity and gut health, and now everybody's becoming allergic to foods and stuff? It's because their digestive system is being shut down repeatedly during the day. You want to know why there's a rise in autoimmune disorders? Yeah, you're healing. The natural tendency, your body's own ability to heal, is being impeded every time you're triggered, every time you're stressed.
Wow.
Insane.
By the way, the statistics are over 94% of primary care office visits to your doctor are for stress-related conditions. And the one thing that most insurance companies will not pay for, at least they would not pay for when my shingle said stress management consultant, they would not pay for stress prevention training.
That makes no sense.
They would pay for the medications, they would pay for the doctor's visits, they would pay for everything else, but they would not pay for prevention because they didn't understand that, an ounce of prevention is worth way more than a pound of cure, especially today. So there we go. That's the story of our common ancestor and the story of stress.
I was going to say, compounding all that stress, I think, has a lot to do with the way we mechanize ourselves with the cell phone. We can start there. I mean, everyone's accustomed to their work and being bombarded by comments, however you perceive them, good or bad, and then that raises your stress level. And then you get on your phone and you start seeing political messages or somebody commenting on something, or you're scanning social media, your body has a natural tendency to go towards the negative.
You do have a natural negative bias, and you just gave a great example of how many emotional remote controls you have given to strangers.
Yeah.
We allow other people to brainwash us.
Mhm.
But the biggest challenge is that we've assigned meaning to other people's words. We have given them an emotional remote control. And you're right, we have a natural negative bias. It's how we survive. The media plays on that. If you want to be healthy, you need to have 3 positive thoughts for every negative thought. How are you doing today? 3 positive thoughts for every negative thought. Keeping score on that is why I unplugged my television.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, turned off the media. And my favorite one, in my book, Your Path from Secret to Success, which is just daily activities for 7 weeks to help you actually manage all of these emotions that get in the way of selling yourself, your business, those kinds of things. This power around stress and ideas and taking it back, getting yourself to a place where you're balancing the number of negative thoughts and positive thoughts, at least getting them even, takes a different level of awareness. And there's not a lot of good guidebooks out there. There are a few, and more are coming. Some of the more recent books are in this field are really, really good. But the reality is we weren't taught to be in control of our thoughts and our emotions. And this is what's coming. This is the leading edge of everything in my mind. This is what's happening. You're going to find more and more of the trainings that say, before you say yes, before you say no, check in. Because it's not a head game. Life is not meant to be played by your head. The prefrontal cortex is missing until you're 24 years old. It's not even physically present until you're around 12, and it doesn't develop until you're at least 24. So you're trying to make the decisions for your life without a whole brain. And isn't it interesting that we're asking our young people to decide what they're going to do for the rest of their lives before they have the ability to reason? There's something about the whole system that's kind of wonky for me. Once I understood how the brain actually works. It's a fun game once you understand it. Playing it without knowing the rules, highly, highly stressful. And I did that most of my life.
So that makes perfect sense. Do you think there's any, I'm sure the way that the system is built nowadays, everything is built around marketing and getting money from people and being snap judgments and emotional judgments. You said the prefrontal cortex doesn't develop until 24. Do you think we put a lot of emphasis on marketing towards the youth of America so that we make more money from them because they're not making a rational decision? They're making a split-second emotionally charged impulse.
I'm going to say yes and yes. Yes, there's a lot of marketing to that age group. We've given them more and more control over finances. We've put credit cards on their devices. That accidentally almost drove one of my children into a point of not being able to pay their bills. Because their kids were too young to understand the consequences of saying yes to games and to subscriptions. And, they had put the credit card in so they could buy one thing. They had just forgotten to take the credit card back out. It was not pretty that month. Yes, the other part of that yes is that just because you have a prefrontal cortex doesn't mean you know how to use it. The marketing is directed to your limbic brain. Everyone is marketing. Everyone who understands neurolinguistic programming, NLP, or who understands that you make decisions emotionally and then you justify them with your prefrontal cortex. You justify them rationally. Call it putting legs under the table. The decision is the tabletop. That's purely made by emotion at every age. You only take action based on emotion.
Yeah.
In my world, emote, the root of emotion, means to move. You only take action based on emotion. And then we start putting the legs under the table. You know, oh yeah, and it was a good idea because it was on sale. And it was a good idea because, you know, yeah, I saw it smile. Yeah. The famous comedian named Gallagher made a fortune by saying, and it was on sale. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Justified.
But yeah, this triggers part of our brain, the
Mhm.
part of our brain that is naturally frugal, that wants a good deal. That's why everything is on sale. That's why there are price step downs. When someone makes you an offer, they'll say, but if you buy today, or Genzu knives, just wait, there's more.
Yeah.
You know? And it's bonuses. Why do they do that? Because they know that this is how your brain works. Once I understood how my brain worked, I was in control. Because I knew, oh, look, they're hitting that pleasure center. It's like going to Vegas and watching all the coins start flying on a casino machine, which happened to me my last time in Vegas. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, I mean, it hits the pleasure centers of the brain. When you can do that for yourself, their marketing becomes less effective. When you can do that for yourself, you are no longer as persuadable. When you can do that for yourself, Og Mandino wrote the book, The Four Agreements. He also wrote Mastery of Love, I believe, was his third book. And he talks about the magic kitchen. And he says, you have a magic kitchen. Once you know this, he calls it making pizza, giving yourself love. Once you know that you have an unlimited supply of pizza, all of a sudden, other people's pizzas are not so attractive. And you can judge, is that pizza as good as mine? And if it's not, you walk away. There's no shame, no blame. It's just not your preference type of pizza. But you know you can make what you really, 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 really want yourself. And that frees you from codependency. It frees you from most addictions. It is the most freeing thing in the world. But whoever, you know, I didn't get taught this growing up.
No.
You know, love thy neighbor as thyself implies that you love yourself, but it doesn't tell you how to get there.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell you how to be your own club owner, how to be in control of the ballpark, how to be healthily self-centered, to bring it back to the beginning of your question.
Yeah.
When someone says you're selfish, what they're saying is, I'm not getting what I want. Can I manipulate you? That's what that means.
That's so interesting. I can see how all of this stuff relates into your teen talk or your teen messages. It's really quite interesting to hear.
I don't teach teens. I just have to name the elephant in the room.
Sure.
I don't teach teens. I believe in following the directions on a bottle of aspirin where it says take 2 and keep away from children.
Yeah.
What I do is, what I did was I figured out what went wrong with my daughter. I figured out what happened during the 23 years between when she first attempted and we entered the whole machine of mental health, and the time that she took and broke the silence, giving a 7-minute message that matters at one of my events.
Oh, wow.
And that's what's in my TEDx talk, is the story of those 2 days. And what I realized had happened in the middle was that I had sold myself on the idea that as long as she was getting professional help, we didn't need to talk about it. After all, why bring that up again?
Yeah.
Heaven forbid I should put the thought back in her head. That's a myth that's killing people. You can't put the thought of suicide in someone's head. The thought of suicide is already there. It's a naturally occurring thought, according to Freud. It is part of our worst case scenario problem-solving mechanism. What's the worst case scenario? If I can't figure this out, I'll just take myself out. Okay, good. We got that settled now. Now you've got the resources to actually focus on the solution. The problem is if you get stuck in that thought. if you become afraid of it, you're afraid to talk about it. You don't want your family to worry. You don't want your boss to find out. You don't want to have to go see somebody. And you don't want to be put into a 72-hour psychiatric hold and then have to explain that absence to the world.
Right.
That program seemed like a good idea at the time. And the need to report is destroying doctor-patient relationships, in my opinion, because somebody can't be honest without having to be afraid that their practitioner. And I didn't realize how big of a deal this was until I was interviewing. I host the Suicide Prevention Show, and I was interviewing the director of the Suicide Institute in New York City. He had recently changed doctors. He had a new primary care physician. He goes in, he fills out all the forms. He turns in the forms to the nurse. The nurse looks them over and goes, are you sure you want to answer this question this way? He says, well, I'm not going to lie. And she said, okay. The next thing he knew, he was in a wheelchair with an armed security guard on each side of him, and he was being escorted into the intake for the psychiatric ward at the hospital.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
A nurse saw him who recognized him and said, what are you doing here? And he told her. The reporting rule takes away discernment from the professional and puts them in a place of legal restriction. And so it's actually maybe not as helpful as they thought, except sometimes it saved lives. Sometimes, though, it doesn't. The state of Florida did a controlled population study for their 72-hour psychiatric. People who'd been in the 72-hour program and people who had not been in the 72-hour program. 4 times as many people in the 72-hour program, veteran group, took their own lives.
Wow.
4 times, usually within the first few weeks.
Oh, wow.
It's the best we've got. And it might save someone's life, because here's the problem with that statistic and with most statistics. There's no way to know how many of those people would have taken their own life if they hadn't been in. Right. Would it have been 8 times as many? Did they save 50%? We don't know. And that's the problem. Suicide prevention, what I call intervention programs, suicide crisis intervention hotlines, measure their success and get funded by the number of calls they receive. Are they bringing down the need for their services? No, because they're not asking that question. They're asking the question, how do we stop suicide? So every program that says it's an intervention program that I could find, there are different ones now, but back then they were all intervention. They all kicked in only when someone had a known risk factor, they had a mental health diagnosis, or they had a previous attempt. Intervention, it's too late to prevent, but it's because they're trying to prevent suicide. So it wasn't too late to prevent people from dying. At the Teen Suicide Prevention Society, we changed the question. And instead of asking, how do we stop suicide? We started asking, how do we stop suicidal thinking from getting stuck? Because the suicidal thoughts are normal. When we're afraid of them, what do you do when you're afraid of thinking about something?
Think about it more and try to problem solve how to get rid of it.
You try to problem solve. What else do you do, though? If I said, hey, don't think about an elephant.
That's all you think about.
Yeah.
It's actually doubling down. And your subconscious mind is elegantly designed to bring about what you think about. This is called the law of attraction. What people don't talk about is the fact that it works no matter what you're thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a thought of, I can't take it anymore. I don't belong here. That was my daughter's. I don't fit in. I'm a burden. All of these thoughts, when you get stuck in them, you try not to think about them because now you're scared or you're worried and you don't want to worry anybody else. So you try not to think about them. You're actually doubling down on them. Since your subconscious mind is designed to bring about what you think about, your subconscious mind, without you being aware of it, starts to look for opportunities and starts to create opportunities to get you what it thinks you want, what you're thinking about. With a teen, no prefrontal cortex, no pause button, no perspective of time that things are not permanent. All it takes is opportunity crossing subconscious plan, and they're gone.
Yeah.
And this is why in this country, we've had to install jump nets on bridges.
Yeah.
Why there are now fences around railroad tracks. All it took was opportunity crossing subconscious plan, and they're gone. And once you understand that this is how the brain works, that this negative echo chamber is in existence, and that you can't tell by looking if somebody's stuck in one.
No.
You can't tell by looking. What I have discovered in the last year is there is at least one person in every room who is grieving the loss of a loved one to suicide. And there is at least one person in every room struggling to stay alive. And you can't tell by looking. So that's why we created the Why Not Workbook, to help people break the negative echo chamber open. It's why we created the Talk to Stop Suicide. That is not interventive, it's preventive. You have this talk with people that you don't know are struggling. You don't care whether or not they're struggling. We teach people to practice it. Would you be willing to practice it with me?
Sure. Absolutely.
Cool. All right. It's only 4 questions. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Usually it would be planned. It would be, hey, I want to practice this. I'm part of the movement to stop teen suicide. I've got a guide. I need to practice a script. Can we talk tomorrow? So it would be planned in advance.
Okay.
So thank you for helping me practice. It's only 4 questions. Ready?
Ready.
Yep.
First question. Have you heard about the rise in teen suicides?
Yes.
Oh.
Thank you. Second question. Do you have a story? Do you have a friend who's tried or died?
Yeah.
No.
Thank you. Third question. Have you ever thought of leaving that way?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. Fourth question. Why stay? What are your reasons for staying?
How much time do you have? Yeah, say.
My family.
Family, friends, kids, growing up.
What else?
Have the kids growing up without parents' guidance. I know I can create better situations for myself. I know that this isn't the only hole in the world, so there's other things I can do.
Another way to ask this is, what's so good about your life that you want more of it? What's so good in your life that you want more of it?
The sun rises, the sun sets, the ocean, the stars, and I see at night.
Me.
My wife.
You. Our kids.
Yeah,
Our
just
parents. Our friends.
experiencing the world as it is. So it's the realization that you come to that, there's good things and there's bad things. It's just life. That's the way it is. You can't have the bad things without appreciating the good things, and vice versa.
When you go back and look at this interview and you watch what just happened in your bodies, when you started tapping into your reasons for staying, you will notice there was a physiological change. This is a very precise set of questions that brings the energy inside and then flips it and actually pulls the energy away from an old neural network and puts energy into a new neural network. And this new set of ganglia, these new neurons, I've forgotten the right word right this minute, is like having a file folder, like a gate. And the file folder says reasons for staying. And now you've got a filter in your brain so that any of these thoughts of leaving has this to bump up against. And you are less likely to get stuck in a negative echo chamber. You just created your way out. And it was just that fast. And that's how we are changing the world. We are changing how people talk about suicide with this simple thing. Now, here's the disclaimer. If someone has had thoughts of leaving and they don't have any reasons for staying, we train people in that moment, you stay with them and dial 911. They might hate you for it. They might end up in a 72-hour psychiatric observance, and you might save their life. If you're not comfortable with that, you're really wonky on that one, you stay with them and get them on the phone with the intervention, a crisis intervention hotline, 1-800-273-8255. I have it saved in my phone under help, because you never know when you're going to need it. People are more willing to talk to a stranger usually than they are to talk to somebody who might know the possible players in their pain.
Sure.
Yeah.
So this is the tool. If you've got they've got thoughts of leaving and they don't have any reasons for staying, they cannot identify a single thing in their life that is so good that they want more of it, you stay with them until they are in the hands of a trained intervention specialist. And we love intervention specialists. If it was not for them, my daughter would probably not be alive today. And you know that fear I had about putting the thought in her head? When she helped me write the script for my TEDx talk, and that was one of the most difficult conversations I have ever had, was that talk with her. We realized that over those 23 years, she had 14 attempts.
Really?
Oh my
Do you
God.
think I would have figured it out that she had the thought in her head?
Wow.
No, I was still afraid of triggering it. And this is where any parent who has a child who has attempted is living. I don't work with teens, I work with adults. I work with 3,000 teens attempt to take their own lives every day. That means 6,000 parents start to live that guilt nightmare that I lived. And I'm determined that none of them need to spend 23 years there like I did. Because you can't put the thought in someone's head. What you can do is prevent it from getting stuck. And that's what our tools do. And every September, we give all of our training away for free to anyone who wants it. Because we're on a mission to make suicide, especially teen suicide, a thing of the past.
So how do people find you to get that training?
They can come to the training by, it's just talksthatsavelives.com.
Okay.
And that's how they can access it. And we're teaching it live. You know, it's not that they're going to get just a home study course. We're actually do live classes and interactive classes. See, we know that suicide is serious. We also know that suicide prevention, pure prevention, stigma-free solutions are seriously fun. So we have a lot of fun.
Oh, good. Let's say if you can turn a problem into a fun deal, I guess it changes the whole perspective of it. So
when you know that you've made a difference in someone's life, when you know that you've helped them create a buffer between them and the edge that they may not have known that they were near, your day is better by definition because you know you mattered that day.
Yeah.
So you're saving more than one life. You're not just creating a buffer for someone else. You're actually building your own buffer between you and the edge.
That's awesome.
very cool.
Yeah.
I'll say we are past your scheduled time limit. If you would like to continue, we can. If not, we can wrap it up now. So
I'm happy to, if I can contribute something to your listeners that will make a difference. I know you had questions you wanted to ask and we kind of got off on some stories.
That's
So
okay.
it happens in my world. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to stay.
okay, then perfect. I've just got a couple of questions. So as a parent, what do you do to keep the lines of communication open? Like you said, you were afraid to talk to your daughter because you had no idea what was going on. I mean, the kids are dealing with hormone changes and their whole main purpose in life at that time is to be accepted by their friends. And
Mhm.
with the internet.
And to prevent their parents from knowing what they're doing. That's
Exactly.
their other main purpose.
Yeah. So how do you get past that cloak that the child has up? Everything's fine, everything's good, and then they turn around and their face just drops. You know, what do we do as parents? Because we'll have teens here in another couple years, and we don't want
Well, the
to
first
be
thing
blindsided
to
by it.
drop your own cloak, drop your own mask, be vulnerable, be willing to say, I don't know if this is true for you. Oh, by the way, that 4 questions that we just walked through, if you do the invitation with your teen, the first step is invite your kid at any age, if they're old enough to have a conversation around this topic, then what you do is simply invite them to talk one-on-one.
Okay.
And the way you do the invitation is, hey, I just interviewed this crazy lady and she had 4 questions and I'd like to find out what you think of these questions. Can I have 10 minutes to talk to you tomorrow? You don't blindside them with this.
Yeah.
And you can tell them she works with the Teen Suicide Prevention Society. You bring up the topic the day before you have the conversation.
Yeah.
And you're asking them, hey, for my radio listeners here, my podcast people, I want to check this out with you. Could you help me? Because you're a kid and I want to know how it impacts kids. When you ask them to help you, you're activating a part of their brain. You're not asking them to help you with chores. Okay. It doesn't work the same way. Sorry.
Yeah.
But when you're asking them to help you with something that means something to you, then you're activating a part of their brain because we love to help. We are hardwired to help. It's part of our natural needing to be in a community because it's not safe to be alone out in the world. It's scary out there.
Mhm.
So we have this need to be in community. When you ask someone to help you, you're firing that part of their brain. So that's where you start.
Okay.
And you can walk them through these 4 questions. And the script is available if you go to youcan'ttellbylooking.com. You'll get the suicide risk factor assessment and you'll get the guide for this talk, with everything you need to know about it. And you just have the talk. Now, if your kids are younger, oh, and by the way, you can use this script and adapt it for other topics that mean something to you. Have you heard about the rise in bullying? Have you heard about the number of kids that are questioning whether they're boys or girls? You can bring up any topic that is meaningful to you using this 4-question pattern. Once you understand why the pattern works, that's why we do the training. And it's super easy. Understanding the pattern makes a difference. But the easiest thing, no matter how old your kid is, we've partnered with a neuro-gamified emotional intelligence building card game company. They have card games that teach emotional intelligence to kids as young as 3 years old.
Really?
Why did we partner with them? Because if I want to prevent suicide in 13-year-olds 10 years from now, the easy way to do it is to teach emotional intelligence skills to 3-year-olds.
Right.
So that's what we're doing. We're working with kids of all ages through that partnership. And so becominggenuine.com is where people can find out about how they can get their hands on these cards and play these games with a tutor with their kids and start building the emotional vocabulary and this awareness that feelings and thoughts are connected. This sense of, I feel because I'm thinking.
Right.
Mhm.
I feel this when I think that. That's simple awareness. Oh, and if you really want to talk with your kids, there's one thing you can do that will change everything. Ask permission. Is it okay for us to talk about that? I have an idea. Would it be okay if I shared it? Ask permission before you give them advice, before you bring up, ask permission. It changes the game. They used to say, pick your battles.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of that language or that thought. What I'm a fan of is pick your timing. Here's what not to do. Walk in on your kid when they're busy on a screen, on a phone with a friend, and try to talk to them.
Yeah.
It's rude.
Yeah.
We don't want them to do that to us, but we do that to them. Why? Because we are so uncomfortable with these topics. I had a brilliant idea. All right. It was a brilliant idea. Think about this. This video pops up with mom, dad, is your teen at risk? Would you wait to talk with your teen about sex until after they were pregnant? Would you wait to talk with your teen about drugs until after they were in rehab? Would you wait to talk to your teen about alcohol until after they lost their license for drunk driving? Are you waiting to talk with your teen about suicide? I thought this is a great public service announcement. You know, back in the day, this is your brain, crack. This is your brain on drugs. I thought, I've got it. This is going to be great. I got crickets. And here's why. I realized parents aren't having the talks with their kids about sex, drugs, and alcohol. And I expected them to talk about suicide. What was I thinking?
Yeah.
And that's why we've made it into a guidebook and made it where it's not a talk with you because I think you're at risk. You know, I would have no way of knowing that both of you would say yes to question 3. When I asked, have you thought of leaving that way? And you both said yes. I could not have predicted that in a million years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You may not have even known that about each other because you can't tell by looking. What this guide does is make it totally safe to have this conversation, and it makes it safe for someone to say yes, because there's no chance that I'm going to probe. I'm not going to ask, is that recent? I'm not going to ask, do you have a plan? I'm not going to probe there, and no one is allowed to probe there because we're not intervention specialists. We go to question 4. Thank you. Pause. Question 4, what are your reasons for staying? And if you've got reasons for staying, there is no reason for me to intervene in your world. It's just that simple. And so you do this with your kids, but start with asking permission. Start with playing games that build their emotional vocabulary, that build the awareness that they are experiencing emotions and that the emotions follow what they're thinking. And that's what the card games do, is build that awareness without trying to teach it to them.
Okay.
Because the minute you try to teach them something, your kids will run from you and hide.
Yeah.
Yes,
If they knew that Monopoly was designed to teach them, oh, by the way, Monopoly was not designed to teach about how money worked. Monopoly was created to teach the evils of capitalism.
Yeah.
It is one of the worst games ever invented because the rule of the game is try to make somebody else go bankrupt.
Yeah.
Okay. But we play it and we think it's all fun. There are better games to play. The newest one that I've played about money, besides financial, and that's a whole nother topic that we're teaching kids about money in a fun way, but cash flow teaches adults about money. And it's Robert Kiyosaki's game. Playing that game is a little different because everybody's going after their own dream. And the goal is to get out of the rat race, to have enough passive income that you don't need active income.
Haven't heard about that game.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting to play.
It is an interesting game. And just like Monopoly, you better plan for a day.
Yeah, right.
And it teaches the rules of investing, and it teaches the rules of business in a way that is not only fun, but applicable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, I highly recommend it. And it is a commitment. Yeah.
Okay.
Hour-long commitment. Well, anything's better than Uno Attack. We're stuck on that right now.
That's not teaching anybody anything.
What's that?
Uno Attack. It's a version of Uno that the kids just love. So we're stuck on that right now.
Yeah. And Uno teaches numbers.
Yeah.
It teaches relationship of numbers. So they are learning something, and they are learning that it's okay to have fun with you, which, by the way, is a life lesson that has way more value than anything else we've ever talked about. That's a life lesson that lasts, that it's okay to have fun with your parents.
Yeah.
Good.
They're learning something important.
Yeah. I want to backtrack a little bit to the point where you were in your bathtub and you felt that shaking. Is that completely attributed to all of the hustle and bustle you had with your marriage, your kids, your job, your career, and then all of a sudden it just came to quiet and you were alone with your own thoughts. What did you do to get yourself out of that? How did you retrain your brain to say, okay, it's okay to be quiet, to be able to sit still with my own thoughts?
Oh, I never told my brain it's okay to be quiet. There's a part of my brain that says quiet. What's that?
Right.
Right. So no, but thank you for asking.
Okay.
Here's once I realized that it was an internal thing, I did what you do. You know, I went back. I had survived 2 bouts of clinical depression at that point. So I was familiar with counseling, therapy, and medication. I was also familiar with the fact that while they could get me stable, they could not cure me.
Mhm.
I went into Eastern Healing Arts. I had studied for 5 years. I'm a certified in a specialized form of shiatsu. Great stuff, but it couldn't cure me either. I traded counseling, therapy, and medication for mindfulness, energy, and meditation.
Okay.
Still good stuff, like putting all that mental and emotional trash in bags. You know, it didn't smell so bad in my mental and emotional kitchen, and it didn't take up quite so much room. The anxiety came because it was still there. And I didn't realize it, but I was living with this baseline anxiety around the fact that something might come along and rip open one of those bags, and I'd have to deal with all of that emotional debris again.
Right.
I mean, we can go into how that debris ends up there in the first place, because I have a theory about that, what was true for me and what it's the way I explain it to my clients. The point of your question, though, is how did I get out of the anxiety? I learned how to take out the trash in a way that's permanent without ever having to open the bag and tell anybody what was in it. And that's what I do now with my clients, is help them take out, permanently resolve the negative emotional history that led to the trash being there. What led me to writing Joe and caring so much about other people's judgments, opinions, and expectations, what led me to having my life lived by other people pushing buttons on my remote control, telling me how I should feel, what I should do, what I should have accomplished by this point in my life. That living in Shouldville, coming out of that dark, dank place where lives get lived and dreams go to die. That's how I cured myself of both depression and anxiety. I've been medication free since 2003, coming up on 20 years.
Wow.
Nice.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
So this is why I do what I do. This is how I ended up being a stress management consultant. I think I actually coined that term because I predate the coaching industry by a good bit. I'm older than I look. The reality is, this is an internal game. Life is an internal game. Life is a game of the pursuit of joy and fulfillment and connection. And the one thing that prevents suicide, just to tag it back, is connection. What you all started listing as your first reasons for staying had nothing to do with you and everything to do with the people you're connected to.
Right.
Yeah.
When you play this game enough with either the Why Not Workbook or the 4 questions, you'll start tagging into even more reasons for staying that are more personal. Okay. The more you play the game, the more you build that file, the bigger the buffer is. But yeah, how did I cure myself of this anxiety? What did I do? It wasn't a decision to think differently. It was a decision to never, ever have that experience again. And I would do whatever it took. And that's probably the most suicidal thought someone can have. I will do whatever it takes to not have that experience again. For some people, the only option they can see is leaving the game, is taking option 3 and leaving life. And we don't take suicide off the table. It's always an option. It's a naturally occurring thought. What we do is make sure that we help people find their reasons for staying, that there are always other options. You know, Star Trek, I'm a big fan. Spock, there are always possibilities. So that's how I came out of it. And that's how I came up with the way of explaining the world using analogies like emotional remote controls and the story of stress. I needed to find simple ways to explain it to myself, that this is what was happening. Well, gee, all I have to do is accept. Remember, accept the rules of the game without conflict. The game of life has rules. I'm walking around in a human suit that has the exact same wiring as Og.
Yeah.
The wiring for stress hasn't changed.
Mm.
We've all got the exact same system that was elegantly designed for the caveman and now fights against us until we learn the rules of the game and accept them. Am I going to get triggered? Yes. Can I dial down the trigger? Abso-flippin-lutely, because now I know how to resolve the memory and take out the trash.
Okay.
My clients say that I'm trigger happy. They get triggered, I get happy. It means the trash is ready to go out.
Right.
Okay.
You know, it's right on the surface. So instead of being afraid of being upset, instead of being around your kids when they're upset and trying to calm them down and trying to get them to feel better, just say, wow, you look really upset. What's going on? Stop trying to soothe their emotion and let them experience the fact that emotions are not permanent.
Yeah.
Instead, what do? We make our kids afraid of their emotions. The biggest crime that was committed in our country was committed on college campuses when they created safe spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of teaching kids how to have emotional self-regulation, instead of helping kids understand how to handle a bully, because there are strategies that work with a bully. It's called assertiveness training. It's been around for a really long time. Really good books. Oh, by the way, I highly recommend The Bully Vaccine for kids ages 8 and up. My friend Jennifer Hancock wrote it. Great book for understanding how to manage bullies. Instead of giving every college kid a copy of that book or a copy of an assertiveness training book or sending them to a class, we created a safe space where they can go. What are we teaching them? You're not strong enough to handle your own emotions. You're not capable of self-regulating your emotions. You need somebody bigger and better than you, bigger and stronger than you. You need the organization. We have taught them to be dependent on an institution, and now we are watching all of our institutions crumble under the weight of COVID.
Yep.
And we've got a generation that does not have the emotional resilience to survive. And we are watching the suicide rates go up.
Mm.
I use a tool. I call it emotional Teflon. It builds that ability for other people's judgments, opinions, and expectations to slide right off of me.
Yeah.
One of my clients took it to their trainer at work and was explaining it to them, told them about, how'd you hear about it? Told them about the Teen Suicide Prevention Society. The lady started to cry. She trains hundreds of thousands of professionals every year. She started to cry. She has 2 teenage daughters. They're struggling. One of them is attempted. The next day, she told him the rest of the story. She's lost 3 of her friends to suicide in the last few weeks.
Wow.
I went into my gym yesterday, and my trainer saw my TEDx talk. Actually, he couldn't watch my TEDx talk, but what he did was read all the comments. He told me why he couldn't watch the talk, which is because he's been struggling at different times in his life. But what he wanted to tell me yesterday was that his 39-year-old cousin, who wanted to get close to him, but he was struggling and he was struggling, last weekend, his cousin took his life. And there is no shame in this game. There is nothing you can do that stops someone from taking their own life. There's no guarantee that if he had been able to reach out, if he had been able to be with him, if he'd been able to get closer, that it would have changed a damn thing, because the people who have the most friends are sometimes the most likely to take their own life. Because you can't tell by looking. But here's what I know. The numbers are going up faster every day. And that's why this conversation is so important to me. I'll stay in this conversation as long as you want to. because you never know whose life you're going to save. Just by your willingness to have this talk with me, you're making a difference in the world. And I thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
We thank you.
I say your messages definitely ring home, and I hope
Mm-hmm.
that we think it was a good fit for us to have you on. And I hope that our messages combined with yours get through to all of our listeners, and they go to your websites that you had suggested. If you wouldn't mind, could you suggest those again for the games and the places for everything?
Absolutely.
Training.
And I'll give you some links that you can put in the show notes for people. So
Sure.
I'll send you the links. And the easy, fast brain retraining tool, you watch it for 3 minutes and it improves your mood and attitude for 6 to 8 hours. By the way, that's a 12,000% return on your time investment. It can be accessed for free at emotionalteflon.com. They're one of our partners. If somebody does get a paid subscription, they devote 50% back to the mission to stop teen suicide. So they're one of our referral partners. Becoming Genuine is where you get the social emotional learning, the neuro-gamified emotional intelligence card games for your kids and adults. They have them for the boardroom, not just the playroom.
Okay.
And that's becominggenuine.com.
Okay.
And if anyone wants these scripts, they want to be part of the mission, they want to know how to have the talks to stop suicide, bullying, self-sabotage, and negative thinking. Those are our 4 talks. We're giving that training away, and it is at talksthatsavelives.com.
Okay.
Okay.
And if anyone wants to connect with me about being on the suicide prevention show or having me speak, they just reach out to team @JackieSimmons.com, and someone will help them.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Jackie.
I say thanks for going over your time limit today. It was well worth it for us. I hope
Yes.
it was for you too.
It was for me. Thank you for
Good.
being willing to play.
Sure,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
We are always willing to learn. So
All right. So everyone
Thank you.
listening, thank you for your time this time. And until next time,
thank you.
thank you.